friends, and welcome. This is an interesting one. I'm actually recording 2 episodes in one day here, but this one's coming out in between episode 43 and 44, so I'm not sure if it's like a 43 and a half or like a special edition. We'll figure that out. But with me today, I have Avenger1 and Farrister, 2 YouTubers that follow Star Citizen that create content for the game, who have both put out videos this week talking about the complications, we'll say, surrounding PvP, piracy, and even griefing. And so they both reached out to me with the thought that maybe we could have a sit-down talk where we all get together, and because obviously we can't talk through videos, we all get together, have a good conversation, and really feel out this topic as a whole, because we have two differing opinions here. I'm not in this, just chilling here. And I think a lot of people are asking these questions to themselves about PvP and piracy and what it all means and how it's all going to work and how we should view it. So Avenger1 and Farrister, thank you guys both for being here for this one today. I'm just going to go across the screen with this. Avenger, good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm really excited to be here, as always, and I'm excited to talk to Farrister, and I'm excited to just dive into a conversation that I feel like is so much more nuanced than I think some people may realize, right? And I'm excited to talk at depth at the issues. Yeah.
Farrister, how are you doing today?
Hey, thank you. Yeah, really good here. I'm the same. I think, my video, which was kind of the initial one that Avenger1 reacted to, I really kind of made that to start a discussion around some of this, and I think there has been a lot of discussion already. So I'm really looking forward to actually exploring some of this and painting some of the facts and letting people decide where they sit on it.
You completed your goal. There's a lot of discussion here now. I'm excited to be on the tail end of that. I like to get into more involved in this stuff. Honestly, I'm not super passionate one way or the other about this topic. I do think it's a really big deal, and a lot of people need to consistently think about it as it progresses throughout development. But I'm very excited to hear what you guys have to say to each other. I think we should start this out first by tackling the most important thing, and that is defining the terms that we're talking about. And this is already where some people might start disagreeing. So we all know what PvP is, right? It's a player versus a player interaction. That's pretty standard. We get it. It's set in stone. But the definition of piracy can change for a lot of people based on whether it's violent, whether it's actually breaking the law, what the motive is, and different things like this. I want to hear from you guys, though. What is your definition of piracy, and how does it translate into the things that we can do in Star Citizen?
Sounds good. Well, I don't mind going first. How do I define? You want me to define piracy first or grief?
Yeah, piracy.
Okay, piracy. So this is tricky because the game is obviously in its development stage, right? So I'm only going to speak to what we currently have right now, and then I'll touch on, obviously, in the future, things are going to change, right? So right now, when I define piracy, it's basically any attack onto a player for the gain of some kind of resource when it comes to piracy, right? So if you're obviously pad ramming something totally different, but if you're going to attack somebody for stealing cargo, for any kind of reason, whether they're on like a planet and you've boxed them in so they can't get away, or you've snuck on board a ship and then you kill the guy and take his ship and get the cargo off, or obviously we saw Jumptown, right, where you're sneaking around. I mean, for the monetary gain, or even if it's not a monetary gain, but there's something you're trying to steal, that would be considered piracy, whether it's a ship and a piece of equipment or the equipment that's on the person. That's how I would define piracy. What about you, Farrister?
Well, we're not yet into the controversial territory. I think I'm in the same space. So I think, there are very loose gameplay mechanics right now. In the future, I hope that gets firmed up with better support for players who do kind of engage in piracy, because there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes, to actually do some of this stuff. But I think you described it brilliantly. It's an attack on a player for resources, whether that's stealing cargo, getting them to pay you, hijacking their ship, or maybe even in future salvaging their ship. But it's kind of done with that purpose of this is my way of making money in the verse.
Yeah. You guys both bring up a good point, and it's not one that you can apply to many games, but this game is still really early in development. There's a lot of mechanics that are missing. There are some mechanics that they've brought in that are kind of like, I don't want to say unfinished, but they don't have that extra mechanic that makes them actually worthwhile. You know, things like how the police can stop us and scan us at a space station. It's mostly broken. Like, let's be honest, that nobody needs that right now, right?
There are no bugs in Star Citizen. What are you talking about?
Like, the supporting features to make that worthwhile aren't there. So they do feel like wastes, and they are confusing to a lot of people too. But the fact of the matter is that this game is still so far away from being a game that you can play like a game. You know, it's usually said in jest, oh, it's a tech demo, oh, it's an alpha, it's not blah, blah, blah. But I say it all the time on my stream, I don't play this game how I would normally play a game that mattered. And I feel like that makes us view these kinds of topics a little differently, because nobody really knows how this is all going to end up.
Oh, I definitely agree with that. I think that's part of the reason why these discussions are so heated, is because most of it isn't necessarily debating what is in game. It's people debating their different interpretations of what will be in the game or what the game will be. You know, a lot of this stuff that we talk about, actually, some of the things that potentially will come online will resolve the arguments. You know, I think some of the things that we might talk about later today is, you know, lawfulness versus lawlessness, different areas of space, different systems, you know, and I think some of those features actually move the debate into a different space. But, you know, equally, it's quite difficult to know exactly what the game is going to be like. And that's part of the reason why people do have these spirited discussions about it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've got a handle on piracy. It's generally, you've got a motive, some sort of motive that is monetary, maybe it's territorial, but there's a reason for you to be attacking that person. Now let's move on to the more interesting word. How would you guys define griefing? We'll start. Go ahead, Avenger.
Well, aside from the meme term that it's become, here's the thing about griefing that I think we can agree on. Griefing is, in my opinion, the singling out of a specific player over and over again, or using mechanics of the game far outside of what they were intended for to cause emotional stress or any kind of discomfort in any way possible. To me, that's griefing. So like pad ramming, or there's not, it's kind of a gray area, you know, because it depends also on the person's tolerance level, like
Right.
you know, and that's something that is tricky, right? Because to somebody, you know, if you get camped in at Klesher, that's griefing. But from another point of view, it's like, I mean, like today, I got rescued from Klesher, got back to Grim, and got torpedoed before I could get back to Grim. And that's just the way. I mean, it was a beautiful shot, I gotta say. Well done. You know what I mean? Like, I don't personally, for me, consider that griefing. But somebody maybe who spent an hour getting out and was really frustrated, like the sense of loss is higher for them, so they might consider, yeah, it's griefing. So it's all dependent on the player, right? So my definition of it, like I said before, is very, very condensed in the sense that it's got to be a personal attack on someone and using game mechanics outside of what they're intended for to cause. And the intent is to cause emotional harm in some way, right? Not that you can take emotional harm. I mean, everyone's tolerance level is different, right? But it's a malicious attack rather than a kind of more spur of the moment. You're just kind of there, you know?
Yeah. How about yourself, Farrister?
Yeah, probably a little bit different. For me, I kind of see it as more akin to bullying. So I think, you know, what Avenger One has described, I would say does sound like it. But for me, it's all about somebody trying to ruin the game or spoil the game for somebody else for the purpose of spoiling their fun, for ruining their experience. I appreciate that's differentiating on the perpetrator's intent, which sounds great when we talk about it on a podcast, but in practice, how do you decide what somebody's intent was? It's a nightmare. I know that. I'm aware of that. But for me, that's kind of where the difference lies. It's in that kind of, I just want to ruin somebody's day. I just want to ruin somebody's game. I want them to feel rubbish about playing the game, so maybe they stop playing.
So So I just want to respond to that. So I agree. How do you know intent? You know what I mean? I mean, unless you ask the guy directly, and even then, it's like you have to assume they're telling the truth, right? The way I come at it, it's like, well, if we can't tell intent, then we have to kind of have some rules in place in the sense like this right here is too far, i.e., pad ramming, right? And the kind of stuff that's in the gray zone, the kind of stuff that some people find offensive and some people don't. My position is, well, it may be uncomfortable, but it's not griefing, because the reality is you can fight back. There are other options for you to have. It's up to you to decide if you can have those options or not. And that sometimes is blocked by either not enough knowledge of the game, not enough knowledge of the systems, not enough experience in the ship itself to even know what kind of options you have. And that's kind of where I come from, where it's like the training side, where it's like if you had more training and experience PvP in a different way, then you would know you have more options, which means the griefing that you maybe took as griefing before now doesn't feel like griefing, because now you know the options you're capable of having because you put the training in to decide what to do if that happens.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about that. I agree with it to some extent. I think encouraging people to learn to improve, I think, is fantastic. And actually, I think this is one thing that Avenger One does really well, not just in the videos but also in the community. Is, he talks about that 1%. How do you get that kind of 1% better every day? And I think that's a fantastic attitude to have. We talked about it, Keenan, when we were, well, yeah. But I've talked about it before. That's one of the things that attracts me to a complicated game, is kind of that element of immersing yourself, improving over time. But for me, that doesn't necessarily have a bearing on how well a player is going to respond outside of their technical skill. For me, I think it was interesting to hear that line in response to kind of my view on the PvE PvP mechanic. But people were saying to me, well, you've only got that view because you're not skilled enough in fighting, and if you were skilled enough in fighting, you'd enjoy it more. I'm not necessarily sure that is the case. I think that's probably a bit simplistic. Learning better skills and improving is one solution, but I don't know that I would say it's the only route that people could go down.
That's fair. Oh, go ahead.
Have you ever heard of the 30% rule?
Enlighten me.
So it's an idea that I heard from game development and also psychology, which basically talks about the success ratio people are kind of looking for. If your success ratio is below 30%, so let's say, obviously 1 in every, 4 fights, you're able to get some success, then you give people enough motivation or enjoyment to kind of get like, oh man, this is hard, but I get some success here. There's something here, so I'm going to continue to get better until they start increasing their success ratio. And if it's below 30% or dramatically below it is, because right now Star Citizen's success ratio for people who train and don't train is dramatically lower than 30%. The people who don't get any success at all don't have a good time in any sort of way. And I mean, the stats don't lie. It's like people, there's entire game companies that design their whole structure of their game around this rule, where it's like they've got to win a little bit because that keeps them invested, right? And my argument is like, I can get you to that 30%, which is then going to kind of fire you up and be like, oh man, like this game really has that level of depth and excitement that maybe people hadn't realized, because they're kind of getting that little bit of edge. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. I mean, for me personally, and I can only speak from my personal experience, I think PvP, if you're not seeking it out, can be quite a rare thing in Star Citizen. Generally, it's not something that I have to deal with. And when I do, I probably say I come out on top 50% of the time, right? I'm not an incredible pilot, but I'm decent enough to kind of hold my own against somebody who is not an Avenger One. Please don't find me in game. But it's still not something that ticks, my boxes. It's not something that interests me. And that's just my own personal preferences, right? Some people like baseball, some people like golf. That is not to say that golf is the right way to play and baseball is the right way to play. People have different preferences. I think the challenge we've got in Star Citizen, if we've got baseball players and golfers both saying this is a golf game, this is a baseball game, and actually I think part of the challenge is to be very, very clear, and this is one of the things I hope to do with my video, is to be very clear to people to say PvP is part of this game, and that is a good thing. PvP makes this game more interesting. It increases the amount of spice and variety. And, for me, I'm really disappointed that I didn't get that point through well enough in my video, particularly for the PvP groups, because actually I think PvP is absolutely critical to Star Citizen's success in being an interesting, living, breathing, varied universe. I guess my challenge is just, where do we find that balance that people still log in and have a good time? And my gut feel is, just saying, well, somebody can learn to be better, that might work for some people, but it's not necessarily a solution for everybody.
Okay. I really like that point. And we were talking about this right before the podcast started, about how that's something that we both agreed on, in the sense that I think some people put me in a pigeonhole too, and they say like, oh, Avenger, you just want to kill everybody all the time and you just want to walk around. It's basically battle royale all the time, whether you're in downtown Earth or you're in the middle of nowhere. It's just like, no, as much as that would make me happy, I want the health of the game to take priority. And, I am a PvP lunatic, but what's important is understanding that there needs to be a gradual scope of risk reward ratio, starting from low risk, but the chance of you running into a Avenger 1, obviously in like the core worlds at Earth or Terra, again, right? Lots of military presence probably. And again, that's not what we have right now, but in the future, that's something to consider, right? And as CIG has said on some occasions, that they're looking to kind of have some systems high risk, high reward. Obviously, the PvP risk increases dramatically in that case. And then low risk, low reward, but it's relaxing. If you want to go and fly around Earth or Luna or the moon and see your Bengal and be with your friends, like, you're not going to make boatloads of money, but you're not going to die every time you log in, right? And I agree with that. I want that to be the future Star Citizen is kind of pushing towards, and I really do think they are. What gets me a little fired up sometimes is right now, unfortunately, we're all living in Stanton. Like it's Hurston, it's dirty, there's sewage everywhere, there's good people and bad people, and we're kind of all trying to live our best lives, in Stanton. And I think that's where we're running into issues, right? Where I come from that side where I want to live in Pyro and I just want to basically fight everybody that's not, my crew, and it's going to be higher risk, but the reward will be there if I put the time in to really develop my skills and make my win ratio much higher because I put the time in. Whereas I feel like, and I can't speak for you, but I feel like for you, you would rather stay to the more systems that are maybe out there on the reaches where there's maybe less risk, but less chance of interacting with a ton of people that are basically out there to get the best resources and that kind of stuff, or spend time with your friends doing stuff you enjoy at core world areas or lower sec areas. Because if the PvPs have it their way and everything's lawless all the time, nobody's going to want to play, because we all know that full loop PvP games just don't make it. And if it goes too far the other way, where PvP isn't encouraged in some areas and it isn't the community kind of shuns PvP, then I feel like the game becomes a little stagnant and it could suffer because of that.
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. I mean, what you've described for me is a balance, because what it says is, hey, the universe is risky, but you decide how much risk you're willing to take. So if you're going to go out onto, I don't know, Star Wars reference, Tatooine, right? You can expect that people aren't going to help you out there. The UAE Navy is not going to be there, getting your back. But equally, if you're parked by the UAE Navy starbase where all the ships are, maybe someone will take a pot at you. It's a free game. That might happen. It'd be pretty stupid, but there will be consequences for that person. So, that's where I would like to get to as well. I think, as you say, the challenge at the moment is everybody's all in one place. And so some people think, hey, it's Star Citizen. It's a PvP game. You need to be up for the fight, which is fair enough. Other people think, actually, I didn't sign up for this experience. This isn't, what I was hoping to do, which is also fair enough, because we've just put everybody who are in different camps into the same melting point and said, get on with it.
I think this is a very key point. The level of security in these systems makes a huge difference. I mean, that's going to change the community's definition of what griefing is, right? Avenger, like you said, you want to be out in Pyro, just be able to attack whoever, right? If you were floating in Pyro and somebody came out of quantum travel 50 kilometers away from you and you went and attacked them and killed them, everybody would be like, oh, it's Pyro, it's dangerous. Like, people are going to kill you because you're there. But if that happens in Stanton, people might call that griefing. So it's almost like it's going to be hard for us to define this stuff until the game really expands a lot. And I wonder to myself, if somebody say is AFK, standing outside of their outpost is a hypothetical. They're just AFK standing outside of a base that they built, and somebody lands their ship, walks over, shoots them in the head, walks away and leaves. Is that a murderous pirate or is that a griefer? And when somebody responds to that, let's say that there is some sort of a reporting system that's put in place by CIG to say, hey, put these people in, we'll see if they're griefing and we'll do something about them. What if that person gets removed from the game even though they weren't actually a griefer? And that's taken away. This is obviously being very hyperbolic, but that's taken away another pirate that is encouraging people to bring out escorts. It's taking away another person that somebody could fight when they're looking for bounties. It's actual content that's leaving the game because one person interpreted an action different from another. It seems it could be a huge divide. And it seems like a big part of that can come from just the availability of the law systems and the reputation systems that we have at the time.
And I think that's why those systems are so important, right? Because for me, there is so much more information that you would need to be able to handle that. Do I think that banning a player that does that is the right solution? Probably not. It's one of the solutions that's employed at the moment because a better solution doesn't exist. But for example, I would see that as being very different if I am sat outside the government office in Lawville or whatever, and someone comes along and goes, pop, there you're gone, versus I'm out in the middle of a moon, in the middle of nowhere, and somebody does that and there's no consequences. For me, that's where things like the in-game consequences need to matter. If you do that in a high security system, I would probably lean towards saying game mechanics should let you do that, but you should also be prepared to face the consequences. You're probably going to get caught. You're probably going to get shot down by people who far outgun you if you do it in a high security place. And hopefully there will be some significant in-game consequences to that. And by that, I don't mean 5 minutes in Klesher to repair the oxygen machine before heading right back out and doing it again. But if you do it in the middle of nowhere and no one sees you and it's known for being a bit of a shady area, well, that's the risk you take. You don't go AFK in that place.
Yeah, I'm going to have to agree with that. Like, I agree.
Yeah, I think that makes a huge difference. And there's just a lot to unpackage there, especially with the way that reputation is, I think, starting to show itself a little bit more in how expansive it's going to become. I mean, we're talking about multiple people having different ideas of you in a system and how that's going to change the way that people respond to you. I don't know, guys. There's a lot that goes into determining whether somebody is doing something to abide by the game rules versus I guess what we would call griefing. And go ahead.
So I got to get this out, otherwise my squirrel ran over. Forget it. So I have a question when it comes to what about the people that are just interested in the combat? Like, I realize that that's not a large portion of the community, right? But this definition of it's either a griefer or like, what about the PvPers? Like, what about people that are just interested in getting into fights and, like whether you're in Stanton or wherever else, like they just enjoy the process of getting into fights. Like for me, I try to teach an ethical method of combat because right now we're living in Stanton, right? So I tell people, and I try to do it on stream. If you watch the stream, like if I can tell clearly that this is an outmatched fight, I'm not finishing the kill. And a lot of times if I am fighting someone and I can tell right away that it's clearly an outmatched fight, and I might just strip the gun off or strip the engine off and then just fly away and text them and be like, look, man, good fight. Because I'm interested in winning the fight. I'm not interested in the human win or loss issue right now. Like I'm more interested in just the process of fighting over and over and over again. I really enjoy it. Right now, I realize I'm an anomaly, and some of us in the PvP community are relatively anomalies in the sense that I derive so much entertainment value from just being excited about flying the ship to the best of my ability. Right. I feel like sometimes it's dangerous to get into the binary where you're either a pirate or you're a griefer, you know what I mean? And obviously the term between the two can be so hard to define, right?
I think so. I mean, your original question there was, what if I just am a purist, a combat purist? I want to fight players because that's where you get kind of the most challenge, the most interesting encounters. Um, I think I respect those people and what they want to do, but I also respect the people who don't want any part of that. And this is all about finding balance, right? There is a gameplay balance. There will be combat purists out there who just want to engage in fantastic combat battles. And I think we should have a place for that to happen. Equally, there'll be people out there that don't want to feel like they're the victim and that people are just shooting them all day. And, there should also be a place for those players because they do exist in Star Citizen. I think one of the reasons I created my video, which specifically kind of relates to the game we've got at the moment in Stanton, is I think what needs to be in place is better signposting for players of the risks that they are taking. And in particular, I think for more peaceful players, there needs to be better signposting to say, hey, going out into space is risky. How much risk you want to take on depends on where you want to go. But even if you're somewhere safe, that doesn't mean a player can't come out and deal with you. It probably just means the consequences for that player are likely to be more severe. And I think that's, for me, what I would want to see improved is that signposting so that players are making their own informed decisions about the risks that they're taking. I don't want to shut down anybody's gameplay. For the combat purists out there, you watch some Avenger 1 videos, the guy is pushing the envelope, right? And that is a fantastic thing. That's what makes the game great. But equally, you don't want people feeling like, hey, I'm just a victim all the time. And one solution to that is, learning and becoming better. But people should also be able to make their own choices about the risks they want to take.
Also, some roles for combat focused people who that'll put them against other combat focused people, right?
Oh, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes I get really fired up and passionate about this because I feel like there's a very large group of people in Star Citizen. Maybe this is my gut. Maybe I'm just lying to myself, right? But I got a feeling that as the game develops, I feel like this crowd's going to grow and grow and grow. I mean, Star Citizen is a game where there's so much to do, but I feel like there's a reason why almost every ship in the game has a gun on it. You know what I mean? And like so much about the game is focused around the combat aspect of whether it's defending yourself or you're out in the reaches of God knows where hunting some crazy space creature. You know what I mean? Like it's still a form of combat, whether it's PvE or PvP. You're still a student of war in a sense, whether it's a player on the other side or it's an NPC, because as the NPCs get better, you will have to become a better student of war, right? So I feel like there's not enough emphasis sometimes in the community when it comes to training and like just understanding the reality. Like, yes, I would love if there was a little more signposting, if Stanton was a little more obvious with the areas that were a little dangerous and there was more reward for pirates to stay in that area rather than kind of gallivant around because they're bored and they just want to shoot stuff, right? And with the server caps we have and the sheer magnitude and size of the space that we can exist in, it's no wonder, there's hot spots, I guess you could say, right? But I feel like if the message of instead of when people get shot down, they go like, and again, let's say you're a new pilot, right? Let's say you just bought the game, you got yourself a 100i, right? And you're excited, you get out there, you get a Port All-Star or Microtech, and it's this incredible experience. You're like, wow, like the clouds. And I mean, let's be honest, there's sometimes we play this game and you got to take a step back and be like, this is truly something next level, right? Then they get shot down right over at Tressler. You know what I mean? Like just when they took off, there's some guy called Avenger 1 or who knows, Avenger Juan, who knows? And he just flies up to him and boom, dead instantly. Right. And you ask yourself, like, what did I do to this guy? What's his problem? Why have I been shot down? Now I got to respawn my ship and I got to do all this stuff. And he's feeling like almost personally attacked. And then the other guy, the PvPer, makes the situation worse by going, yeah, get good, bro. You know what I mean? And then then you have the guy who got shot down going on the forums and being like, yeah, screw these guys. They should be removed from the game. And it creates this divide, right? And that's like the situation happening over and over and over again, where I feel like if the PvPers just tried for a second to be like, look, I would like to shoot the floating box and see the pretty explosion, but ethically, he's probably a new player. It's really no need to shoot this guy down. It's just going to lead to him being upset and frustrated. But that, unfortunately, is not a moral code that everybody follows. And I mean, I try to follow as best I can, but there's sometimes where the trigger slips. I'll be honest, because at the end of the day, the personal feeling of regret, I guess, or the bad feeling is the interpretation of the person that got shot down, right? And I feel like if there were more avenues and there was more publicity in the sense that this new player that got shot down had more access to information that said like, okay, you got shot down, it's all good, don't worry about it. Here's some tips, here's some things to know, here's some things to watch out for. Don't worry about go, and because there's lots of ways to get away right now. Like, it's actually very easy right now to just nope on out of a fight. It's hard to really commit someone to a fight right now. But a lot of people don't even know that that's the truth right now. And that, I think, leads to a substantial amount of our issue. And
the second big problem that is kind of unique to Star Citizen, they just don't have the stuff in the game to even tell the people this stuff, like you just said, it would be great if they could just look up and understand, okay, so this is what happened, this is how I fix it. But you can't even, Star Citizen has little hints that pop up at the bottom, but they're not going to pop up a hint that says, hey, this is how you do combat. And that also really hurts. There's no tutorial really. If a player hops in and they've spent 2 minutes in the game, they don't even know they need to look that stuff up yet, because Star Citizen's just still lacking a lot of those systems. And it also kind of, just from that example, does feel like a lack of supply too. If somebody who wants PvP is flying around Stanton, what are the chances, if there were enough players in the system, what are the chances that they would be looking around Port Tressler?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think that is a good point. If you've got hardcore PvPers who say, I'm out there for the thrill of the chase, for the thrill of the fight, to get some great experience, and then they're shooting brand new players that are taking off in their starter ship. I'm with Avenger 1. I'm wondering how much learning they're really getting from that. I think for some people, not for everybody, but for some people, there will always be a winner and a loser in PvP combat. And for some of those people, it probably feels sucky to be the loser. I mean, Avenger 1, you're a real, mature PvP player. You manage to find the win in every scenario. And I don't just mean because you're good at fighting, but because you draw the experience from every battle. But that's not going to be the same for everyone. So I think I agree. It might be really helpful for some people to have that extra signposting to say, hey, you were shot down. These are the things that you can do to improve. But I also might think it'd be helpful for some people to say, hey, you were shot down. But you know what? The UAE Navy went after that guy who thought it was funny to shoot you down. And, these are the consequences for that person. And that I think focuses the PvP. It focuses fights to be much more level on skill and less about, the mismatch in skill between people.
That's fair. And
I just want to pick up on another thing that Avenger 1 did say that I actually agree with, which is something that I'm worried about the game, and one of the reasons that I had for making the video, which is my nervousness that if people are not aware of these risks and are not aware that PvP is an important part of the game, somehow the game does get watered down. So my memory is drawn to those, I personally found awful screenshots of Jumptown where everybody was just lined up in a row. And this is an event that was publicized as, this is going to be hot. This is going to be PvP at its best. You don't want to be going anywhere near Jumptown if you're not ready to fight. And quite rightly, a lot of people were saying this is ridiculous because people were lining up and then complaining when some guy came and shot them. It's a PvP event. That's supposed to happen. So I think this is where the signposting is really important to me, because PvP adds to the game.
It does. It's an important part of the game.
The Jumptown one got me. So... yeah, I'm 100% on board with Farrister's comment on that, because I can't tell you how many times I have flown over top of Jumptown as a solo arrow and seen like a mosh pit of people all partying, shipping boxes, and then I kind of And I'm trying to be ethical, but I go, click, click, click. I go, hey guys, you got no air cover. You're all outside. I'm just gonna say you're gonna have to pay me now because I can shoot and kill all of you right now and take all your boxes, or I can teach you a lesson here and be like, it's Jumptown. You're literally raiding a drug lab on a criminal moon. Don't be surprised if a criminal shows up and goes, hey guys, give me your money. And I think because the way we don't have server sharding in yet, so many people get away with this, right? Where they just show up and they're like, hey, I want to make some money. And I get it, right? I mean, I understand too that the need for community and the need for like working together. But this knee-jerk reaction to, why did that guy shoot me at a drug lab selling drugs? And their reaction is, you know, this guy is a griefer and blah, blah, blah. And CIG even sold the like the event as a, like, guys, like, grab your guns. It's going to get real. And, you know, the level of denial, in a sense, you know what I mean, was staggering to me, because I come from games like EVE Online, right? Where, you know, EVE Online is one of those games where I'm kind of hoping Star Citizen doesn't go too much towards EVE Online, because I'll be honest, it could be really rough on people, right? Like, you lose your ship, it's legitimately just gone. Like, you have to buy a brand new ship. And I wouldn't be opposed to that style of game, but in the same way, I mean, it's pretty stressful. I'm not gonna lie, right? So, you know, and I'm like a seasoned PvP kind of guy. Like, I'm used to it. I'm used to that sense of loss. I've developed a not a reaction or a resistance to it, but I've developed an understanding of that kind of mechanics that, you know, when you see people kind of getting into Star Citizen, I mean, if they lost their ship, oh boy, I mean, there would be fires in downtown LA at the studio for real. You know what I mean?
Yeah, they'd be done.
Yeah, you know, and I understand that, right? But it's like, I feel like it's the responsibility of content creators at the moment, because I feel like it's 50% CIG, 50% us as the community. And I talked about this when I was doing Squadrons too. It's like, look, the devs can only do so much. They're building the game. At some point, you got to kind of be like, look, it can't be 100% them. Because the reality is, if we as content creators say, okay, look, if you're that guy in the 109 and you get shot down, watch this video, man. Like, it's all right. It's not a big deal. Just respawn your ship. Here's some tools you can use. And the next time it happens, you'll be ready for it, right? And that's kind of the message I'm trying to give out, which some people misinterpret as like, you know, but the guy should be able to fly in the 100i by himself. It's like, yeah, I would like that to be the case. But the reality is that guy in the 100i right now is a target. So what's the best thing to do? Focus on what situation is currently happening right now and what we can mitigate right now? Or live in La La Land, where we want to pray to Chris Roberts and be like, Chris, please make two systems. Please separate these people, because right now it's just not the truth. Well, right? And so my perspective has been like, look, I would like that. I agree with Farrister in that sense, because I think it's a healthier game that way. But right now we don't have that option. And so the best thing you can do is you can deny the PvP aspect, but then you'll always be victim to it, or you can just accept it and be like, okay, at least give me the tools I need to mitigate some of this so that I don't die every time. Maybe I only die 50% of the time.
I think the risk for me is, though, that people have more options than that. You know, I think you're talking about a subset of players that are potentially more like you there, Avenger One, which says, hey, I got shot. I need to do better. I need to learn more. And, you know, I think the work that you do to help those players is admirable, not just through the video contents that you kind of put out there, but also the direct work you give on giving people feedback. But that's not going to be everybody's reaction. You know, I gotta be honest, I don't feel like investing a whole lot more time in kind of learning more about the mechanics. Now, I don't really have a big problem with PvP in game at the moment. I think it's very rare, and as Avenger One says, it's quite easy to disengage from once you know what you're doing. But that said, you know, if I was in a situation where as a new player I was just getting killed, I think I'd take another option, which is stop playing. And I think that'll be a very popular option for people. And I think that's a shame. That's what I think is kind of what I'm worried about, is a lot of people will just take that option to say, hey, this isn't the game for me, when actually it could be. We just need to do a better job of signposting what's safe activity versus what's not.
And this is, well, that's going to be, I I won't distract from the conversation. I was just going to say that's something that's going to be true of a lot of different game mechanics too. The medical system, the cargo hauling, the refining, the mining. This game is really deep, and it's worth considering. How easy do we make it so that doesn't happen? You know, somebody gets killed, right, their first time out. They go, wow, this sucks. But instead of just freaking out and saying that person should be banned, they do the mature thing. They go find some resources, they train, they spend a couple hours, they go back in game, and boom, same thing happens. How many times can that happen to someone before they quit the game? And should we care?
Okay, can I say something? So thank you, because you nailed it, right? Now, here's where I'm coming from in this issue. Let's find something we can agree on here, Farrister. So do you agree that there is a certain level of attrition that every game has? Yes?
I guess so, yes.
Now, would you agree that the games that last decades are games that are typically relatively shallow or relatively deep with high skill ceilings?
Relatively deep, I'd say.
Now, with the deep games, would you agree that the deeper the game, typically the larger the fall off of the overall player base?
I wouldn't know. I would assume so.
So, I can think of a couple games. Like, I use EVE Online because it's the most similar to Star Citizen, right? Where it has a very excited core gameplays, and the skill ceiling and difficulty of getting into the game is higher than Star Citizen. It really is, right? And so, but it's been going on for 2 decades, and it seems to probably be going to continue on for quite a while, right? Games like, let's use World of Warcraft, right? Different kind of genre, so it's a different audience as well, right? But you know, there's always an attrition rate, and it's also a more completed game. I mean, alphas also have an attrition rate too, right? So as the game develops, the people that maybe quit for this patch will come back later and be like, okay, what's going on, right? But I feel like we should care about the people that are like disappointed to the point where they're like, oh, come on, man, like I don't want to play this, and they punch out, right? And I think that's where I say it's our job as content creators to be like, okay, before you quit, just know your options, because they might look at it and be like, yeah, but I don't want to get better at the game in that way. I don't want to learn how to corkscrew, do all these things. I just want to be left alone. And if that's their answer, that's fair. That's their choice. But my point of view is like, most people don't even know that those are the options out there. And I feel like there'd be actually quite a few people that if they were given those options and understood like what tactical choices they have in some given situations to gain the success they're looking for, that they wouldn't quit.
I think the problem for me is that, in my mind, the newest players to the game should not be having that experience. And I think this kind of is the root of the challenge for me. I mean, you talked about EVE Online there. I played EVE briefly, so forgive me if my terminology isn't great. But when you start, you don't get dumped into nullsec. You start out in a relatively safe space with a small ship with low consequences to teach you the game, and you tend not to have people like dumping on you right away as soon as you take off in game. You can go out and explore different places, and it warns you, hey, this place is getting more risky. This place is getting more risky. There could be consequences. And that's what I'd like to see in Star Citizen, somewhere where new players can get into the game, can learn to take off and land and do all that other stuff without some guy shooting them and saying, hey, you should learn to be better. That works for some people, but not for everybody. I think the challenge is right now, and one of the reasons why I thought this conversation was important is, if you speak to a lot of PvP players, my gut feeling is, don't want to put words in anybody's mouth, but my gut feeling is a lot of PvP players would say, hey, Stanton is nullsec, right? This is the Wild West. It's a PvP game. It's a free-for-all. You've got to deal with it. You've got to learn, take the consequences. I think if you talk to a lot of other players, they would say, actually, Stanton is my starter system. It's where I'm just logged in to learn the game. It is the safest space, or should be. And, I think the problem is, my gut feeling is neither of those is correct. And I think that's why the signposting piece and making people aware, but also giving real consequences to people depending on what they're doing in game is really important.
Okay, so I agree. I do agree. However, I feel like the two opposing sides in this specific argument are what should be and what actually is. And I feel like the people that are more on the PvP side are kind of looking at it from like, look, whether Stanton is supposed to be X, Y, or Z, it doesn't matter. The fact is I can go outside and I can shoot somebody at Port All-Star, and the guns at Port All-Star do nothing. Right? And there are mechanics in place, but because the combat also is going through its growing pains, right? The punishment of committing hoboistic random murder across the stars,
Hoboistic.
right? Is not effective, and that's the problem. It's like, look, if the military showed up and actually killed you, like, it would be a totally different story, because the F8 Lightnings that show up and shoot at me, I mean, I've killed them in the Pisces, which is like a shuttle, like the F-22 of the Navy, killed by a minivan with a machine gun on top, right? And so it doesn't help the situation when the combat is in a state where the punishment systems aren't effective. And thus the PvPers say, okay, well, you can think it's supposed to be like this, but once you start learning and becoming better at the game, you realize that Stanton plays like a nullsec system. It plays like a system that doesn't have rules, because even if you get a crime stat, in worst case scenario, you go to prison, you're only there for so long, and the PvPers develop a very fast immune system at dealing with a Klesher, and they're out of there relatively quickly, right? And they're back at it, killing people, right? And I feel like that's also what's inflaming this issue, because I agree with Farrister in the sense that we need to protect our rookies at all costs. It's like protecting your children in a community. Like, they are the next generation. You protect your rookies, right? And right now you can't protect your rookies from the wolves. And so my standpoint is, okay, you can either be the wolf or you can be the sheepdog and stop the wolves from killing your rookies. Because either they're going to kill your rookies and they're going to leave anyway, which is the reality, or you're going to, quote unquote, get good. But I like to consider the term become experienced, so that you can protect the things that you enjoy. So let's say you have a rookie, someone you're trying to bring into the game, and you've taken some training, you at least know some of the basics, and you've got him in your turret, and you might come across a PvPer who's maybe not that experienced, but he knows that he can get away with it, and most of the people he engages are probably not going to come out on the good end. But because you did some training, you watched a couple of videos, and you knew that the reality of Navy's not going to really help you, and the punishment system, it's really not that effective. So if you see a player, you got to be ready. He's able to get his rookie either out of harm's way or survive, and that experience in itself is also healthy for the game in a certain way, if they're able to gain the kind of success without just getting run over and over and over and over again, right? So so come back to the original point of living in the wannabe, I want it to be this way, or living in the reality of what it's actually at, and then looking at the options that you do have, because PvP is not going away. And as much as we would like it to be separated in a sense, and systems to work intended, and different systems to cater to the different styles of play, that's not the case right now. And so the best way to protect our rookies is to give them the only tool they have, and that is to understand their options in a tactical environment. Thus, the only option is to, quote unquote, get good. Otherwise, we condemn them to be shot over and over and over again, and then they'll leave anyway.
All right,
so we're doing a disservice to them.
But let's not settle on get good as being the message.
Okay, maybe that's a bad word.
We can also tell them, go be a turret in somebody else's ship, right? Like, people can be co-pilots in this game for a while and get a better understanding.
Option.
Yeah, I agree with you in the fact that, like, they need to be prepared for that.
I think there's a couple of things on there that, I mean, first of all, that puts the onus on new players rather than putting the responsibility on existing players to make this game work. And, I'm still not 100% sold on that. It'll work for some people. It won't exist for others. But I think the other piece that...
none?
Well, I think more is better than some. But I think there are other things that you've said, Avenger One, that, just because is what it is doesn't mean we have to accept what it is. So, for example, the current in-game mechanics permit pad ramming. Avenger One, I know you actively discourage that. It's not PvP, it's not good gameplay, it's pretty much an awful experience for everybody. So Avenger One has publicly kind of said this is not the thing to do. But the mechanics allow it. There are other things that the mechanics allow that I know people wouldn't encourage. Yeah, but other things like, if I'm being attacked by another player and I don't like it, I could just log out. I've been reading today about how many PvP players hate that, right? And I can understand why. But it's a mechanic, but it's not what it should be. And I think we're here today not necessarily to tell people about what it is, because I could put out a video saying, hey, you fed up of PvP players attacking you? Just log out when it happens. But that's not a good experience for anybody.
You'll
so for
never
me,
die.
I think we should... Exactly. We should be evolving the discussion to say, actually, what is a good way to cater for as many players as possible to get the most interesting, varied game that suits the most possible people? And that's kind of what I would want to get to. I think the education piece is great for some people, but I think there's also a responsibility piece about how we manage the behavior as a community.
I'll agree with that.
This really, it's a problem that's similar to a lot of the other ones Star Citizen deals with. The systems just aren't here yet. I mean, the game is going to be entirely different after we get Pyro, just because of what you've been talking about, Avenger. I mean, I won't say that Stanton is a starter system by any means, but newcomers are going to be way more safe there after Pyro is in the game, not just because all of the evil people will be over in Pyro, but because the player base will just be more spread out. You don't believe so?
No, I want you to finish your thought, and then I'll have a rebuttal.
No, I was all done.
So I think the assumption is people think they'll be safe in Stanton when Pyro comes out, and I think it's going to be the opposite. Because where are the people going to be?
Wherever the other people that are fun to fight are. I mean, that's what we were talking about, right? Like, you would rather go and fight the person who's good at fighting than the person who's just flying up to Tressler and just blows up.
Would you, though?
But it
depends on who you are.
That I am typically an anomaly. So I'm going to use an example to talk about human nature side of things. So I'm going to use EVE Online as a reference because it's the closest thing. Jeddah is the trade hub capital of EVE Online. There are usually anywhere from 2,000 to 6,000 players in that system at any one time, typically all functioning at Jeddah 4.4, which is the largest trade hub station. There are more people killed in Jeddah, which is a 0.9, which is almost perfect high sec. More people killed in Jeddah on a daily basis than entire regions of nullsec space combined, because that's where the people are. Now, the punishments are so extreme that as soon as you engage somebody, you are instantly killed. Instantly. Which means the forms of attack have developed in a certain kind of way, because in a game, you're not dead when you die. You just simply respawn. And Star Citizen is a game like everything else. So when you're dead, you, as a person, can just go, okay, let's try again, and we can continue to play that mechanic. In the sense that if you design systems to simulate real life, real death is a problem, but not in a video game. So, if people are going to go to where the people are, and also don't forget pirates are going to go where the people are because the pirates want the cargo. Now, right now we can't board ships, but that's coming probably quite soon. And when guys can start jumping and pirating 3 or 4 hit miss sea ships in an hour compared to the one Hull C series ship they might find at Pyro, because they know Pyro is dangerous. So the guy that's there is probably either going to be experienced, which means he's going to be a harder fish to catch. Like, there's always that balance there too, right? And we know the rules in Stanton are not that hard to circumvent. It's not that hard to get away, right? And so the best form of anti-PvP, and this is where it gets controversial, is PvP. You need to give the bounty hunters the tools they need to stop the bad guys, right? And the way to do that is PvP. Because what's going to happen in Star Citizen is you're going to have the PvP crowd protecting the non-PvP crowd. And the non-PvP crowd is going to be giving the money and the equipment and the resources and the gameplay loops for the PvP crowd. Both need each other. It's a duality system.
But we're also kind of ignoring the AI side of all of this. So I don't know how good EVE is with their security, but, and this is, I guess, my own personal hopes speaking, I don't believe a bounty hunter should be able to, or not a bounty hunter, sorry, a pirate who is killing people regularly. I don't think that they should at least be able to last in a system like Stanton unless A, they're staying near a place that is lawless or unmonitored, or B, they are just the best player out there, in which case, well, there's only a few people who could do that.
But if it's something that one person can do, more people will start to do it.
That's fair.
It's like the first person that breaks the world record, all of a sudden a month later, it's been broken 4 or 5 more times then.
The system will never be perfect. We'll never be able to eliminate all of something that we believe shouldn't be happening. But if they're able to limit it and at least push content in a certain direction for certain people, I think that helps.
Or react to it. So, you might find that, initially a star system is pretty safe and pretty secure. And then somebody figures out some clever ways to deal with that, or a secret base from which to position their fleet and becomes less secure. And then you go one of two ways. You say, actually, this used to be a safe star system. It's not anymore. And players need to accept that and maybe move somewhere else where the risk is lower. Or maybe, you send in the AI, or you create a big in-game event where everybody is, role-playing as some Navy ships and goes and actually deals with the problem, and you change the consequences. I don't think Star Citizen is a game where you kind of finish up development and say, right, that's it, it's done. You can rebalance on the fly, and you can rebalance based on encouraging player behavior in a certain direction.
Yeah, and that's the idea behind the quantum system, at least as they've proposed.
The Quanta?
Don't. Quanta is not the name.
Okay, so I am having an absolute blast with this conversation, and it's already gone on longer than I thought. I have some commitments, and so I will leave off on this. And hopefully, maybe one of these days, who knows, we can sit down again. We can go a little deeper, maybe when Pyro comes out, and we can talk about this, because there is so much to unpack just in this episode alone that I think people can chew on this for quite a while, right? So I will leave off with this. I would love to see, talking about what we talked about just previously there, is a symbiotic relationship between both styles, right? I would think it'd be really cool that, if you want to add some kind of world building event, CIG might want to consider having a certain kind of event where players that are typically on the more PvP side, why don't you let them control Vandal ships for a day or two and let all the other people in the server try to kill these Vandal ships? You can go under, change the names, whatever. You can role play the Vandal, whatever the case may be. But things like that, I feel like could really help, because it would raise awareness for the PvP side of things. And people could kind of expect, like, it's a Vandal ship. It's there to kill stuff. It just shows up and just destroys everything, because that's what the Vandal do, right?
They're pretty mean.
The whole premise behind Squadron 42 is a warring, tribalistic, traveling, angry race of murder space hobo type playstyles.
Murder lizards.
So
with dreads.
So I will say, Farrister, I had an absolute blast discussing these with you, and Keenan. I had an absolute blast coming on the show again. I love this show, and I really appreciate you guys, man.
Of course.
And I want to see I'll leave off on this. My intent has always been the health of the game takes priority above any kind of personal direction. I'd like to push the game. I think the best game that we can have for the most amount of people, but not at the sacrifice of reducing the depth and intensity that the game can give you, then I think we're in the right spot. I think we can agree on that.
Yeah. And on that note, hitting that hour mark, it is a good time. Farrister, did you have any closing comments you wanted to leave before we got off of here?
Just in the interest of time, just a really quick piece for me. I think, what people want from the game is all different. In Star Citizen, my personal view is there's room for everybody. We just need to find the balance. I hope what people take away from today is reasonable people can disagree reasonably. It doesn't automatically mean one person is right and one person is wrong, and it doesn't apply to them as a person. There are some things that Avenger 1 has said that I disagree with. There are some things that I've said that he disagrees with. But hopefully, one of the things that if people listen back to this here, most of all, is I agree with Avenger 1. I agree with Farrister. There is more common ground than there is difference. For me, it's a case of just focusing on where are those differences, but recognizing that common ground as well.
Yeah, not absolutes. Well, everybody, thank you so much for watching or listening. If you're on the many audio podcast platforms that we're on, I appreciate everybody coming, especially supporters who are watching this live. You can check out the links down below if you'd like to become a supporter on any of the platforms that we offer. But overall, I'd just like to make sure that you guys go check these two out, because they make great content. Good guys, obviously have a lot of great conversations and are reasonable people. So just going down the line once again, Avenger 1 and Farrister, if you could let them know where they could find you guys, we'll go ahead and sign off.
You can find me on Twitch at Avenger__1 and on YouTube at Avenger1.
And you can find me on YouTube at Farrister.
Cool. And we will have those links down below, like I said, as well as, like I also said, some supporter stuff. Check it out. Just released another exclusive video today you guys might like. But again, I've been Space Tomato, or Keenan if you'd like, and this has been the Launch Sequence Podcast, some kind of special mid-episode, I'm not really sure, but hope you guys enjoyed it, and we'll see you again next week.